Light is also a wave. It's something called an electromagnetic wave, and it falls into a very broad category of things. An electromagnetic wave essentially is we have a wave of alternating electric field moving up and down, and then magnetic field moving perpendicular to it, kind of all at the same time. But the real takeaway from this is that light's just this kind of nice, neat, sine cosine wave like we're used to seeing, which means it has a lot of the same properties that we talked about with waves before. For example, we had this relationship. The velocity of our wave was frequency times wavelength. Same thing holds true for light and electromagnetic waves, except instead of V, we're going to use C, where C is the speed of light in a vacuum, 3.0 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. So the only real difference between light and any other wave is just that we have this sort of specific, very constant number that we're using for light for its velocity. Now, we talk about light a lot being an electromagnetic wave, but light actually is a very, very small part of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So all the things we're about to look at fall under the category of an electromagnetic wave, just at different frequencies and wavelengths and energies. So for example, all of these things fall under the category of the electromagnetic spectrum. Maybe we'll make it a little bit bigger so that we can see it. Radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible, so there's that little tiny bit of light that we're used to. Ultraviolet rays, X-rays, gamma rays are all the exact same type of radiation. They're just different frequencies and wavelengths. And so you can see, how these are made. Accelerating charges means we're kind of moving electrons back and forth. Kind of very similar things here until you get to X-rays and gamma rays that are slightly different in terms of how they're created. They all have certain applications, certain things in life science as well, but they all have their own issues as well that can, be as simple as, certain controls required for them so that we're not, sort of overusing and overlapping to things like cancer and radiation damage. And that all depends on the frequency and wavelength of light and how it interacts with different things around it. Turns out the frequency that light has, or the frequency of electromagnetic radiation, affects what types of things it interacts with. For example, X-rays will go through, soft tissue, but won't go through things like bone. And that's because of the frequency and wavelength that it's made up of. So across the whole electromagnetic spectrum, we might want to look at, where these wavelengths and things lie. So let's take a look at this real quick. This is a good sort of indication of the electromagnetic spectrum and sort of where everything lies on it. So this big range here, where we're talking about wavelengths of thousands, millions of meters to down to centimeters, millimeters, is the whole sort of radio waves range. Microwaves make up this kind of nice little small part of it. TV signals, FM radio falls in here, AM radio, the associated frequencies here. Then we have infrared, sort of right here below our colors. Here we have our colors. It's pretty important that we know sort of the order of our colors here. Notice they make up a very tiny portion of the full electromagnetic spectrum. And if we were to break it out a little bit, it's easy to remember the order for colors like this. If you can remember the name Roy G. Biv for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet are sort of our basic colors for the visible part of the spectrum, and that's in order from sort of low wave or longest wavelength to highest wavelength, just like we have on here. So longest, shortest wavelength. Going past that, we have ultraviolet rays, X-rays, gamma rays, and notice our wavelengths are decreasing to really, really small amounts, and therefore really, really high frequencies. Frequency is proportional to the energy in a wave. So frequency is directly proportional to the amount of energy carried in a wave. So the electromagnetic spectrum, as it's written here, is from low energy up to high energy, and that's the same thing for visible. Red light is the lowest energy light, violet is the highest energy light. And sort of that's kind of the order going from left to right here is low energy to high energy, low wavelength or low frequency to high frequency, big wavelength to small wavelength.